What if I told you that the exhaustion you feel every day, that invisible weight pressing down on your chest, that constant mental chatter that never seems to quiet down, what if all of that isn't actually yours to carry? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. There's an ancient manuscript, hidden for centuries, that speaks of a different kind of alchemy altogether, not the transformation of base metals into gold, but something far more profound, the transmutation of human suffering into inner power. The man who wrote it was called Alharion, and he discovered something that modern psychology is only beginning to understand, that what we call stress today was known in his time as the invisible poison of the soul. Has this ever happened to you? You wake up feeling relatively okay, but by the end of the day, you're completely drained, not from physical work, but from something you can't quite name. You find yourself carrying a heaviness that doesn't show up on any medical scan, a fire without flame that burns you from the inside out. You smile, you function, you tell everyone you're fine, yet somehow you've lost touch with the person you used to be. Alharion called this phenomenon the prison without bars, a condition where we become trapped not by external circumstances, but by invisible forces that slowly extinguish our inner light. What's fascinating is that he understood something we're just rediscovering. This isn't a modern problem. This invisible burden, this spiritual exhaustion, has been plaguing humanity for millennia. The only difference is that we've given it new names: anxiety, burnout, chronic stress, but the essence remains the same. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you understand your own energy and why you feel the way you do. Alharion's manuscript wasn't written for scholars or academics. It was written for people exactly like you and me, people who've been carrying loads that were never meant to be ours, people who've forgotten how to breathe deeply because their souls have run out of space. The most dangerous thing about this invisible poison isn't that it hurts, it's that it's socially rewarded. The more you endure, the more you're praised. The more you sacrifice yourself for others, the more admirable you become. The more you push through exhaustion, the stronger people think you are. But here's what Alharion discovered. This isn't strength at all. It's a slow form of spiritual suicide. What makes his approach revolutionary is that he didn't focus on managing stress or coping with anxiety. Instead, he taught something far more powerful: how to transmute these forces entirely, how to take that fire that's been consuming you and transform it into the very energy that awakens your deepest potential. He understood that the same force that can destroy you can also be the catalyst for your greatest transformation. The manuscript speaks of hidden chambers accessible only to those whose inner fire burns stronger than their fear. But what if I told you that you already possess this inner fire? What if the very intensity you've been trying to suppress is actually the raw material for your liberation? Right now, as you're listening to this, something inside you is recognizing these words. There's a part of you that's been waiting for permission to stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. There's a wisdom within you that knows the difference between authentic responsibility and the invisible chains you've been wearing for so long. The ancient alchemists understood something we've forgotten. True transformation doesn't happen by adding more to your life, but by removing what doesn't belong. And in the space that's created when you finally let go of what was never yours, something extraordinary begins to emerge. But here's the hidden truth that Alharion discovered, and it's probably the most important revelation you'll hear today. The heaviest burdens we carry are the ones nobody can see, not even ourselves. Think about your daily life for a moment. From the outside, everything appears perfectly normal. You wake up, you go through your routines, you interact with people, you accomplish tasks, you smile when expected, you respond appropriately, you say, "I'm fine," when asked. Your body performs flawlessly, your voice sounds steady, your hands write, your mind processes information. But somewhere along the way, something fundamental shifted. You stopped truly inhabiting yourself. This is what Alharion called the most dangerous burden, the invisible load that accumulates not through dramatic events, but through tiny betrayals of ourselves. Every time you say yes when your soul screams no. Every time you take on responsibility driven by guilt rather than genuine desire. Every time you comply with expectations that feel foreign to your core being. Layer by layer, decision by decision, you build a prison so subtle that you don't even realize you're trapped inside it. The devastating part is that this process is completely socially acceptable. In fact, it's celebrated. Society rewards self-betrayal when it looks like selflessness. It applauds fear-based compliance when it appears as reliability. It honors guilt-driven responsibility when it masquerades as dedication. And so we continue down this path, accumulating invisible weight, until one day we realize we've lost our center entirely. What's happening is a gradual disconnection from your authentic self. Your body becomes a vessel that operates independently of your spirit. Your voice speaks words that don't resonate with your truth. Your hands perform actions that don't align with your deepest values. You're functioning, but you're not truly living. You're existing, but you're not truly present in your own experience. Alharion understood that this wasn't a personal failing or a character flaw. This was a predictable response to living in a world that demands conformity over authenticity. He recognized that we develop these patterns as survival mechanisms, ways to navigate social expectations and avoid rejection or conflict. But what starts as protection eventually becomes prison. The transformation begins when you recognize that this invisible burden isn't actually part of you. It's something you've accumulated, which means it's something you can release. The weight you've been carrying, the constant exhaustion you feel, the sense that you're living someone else's life. None of this is your natural state. It's simply the result of choices made from fear rather than love, from obligation rather than inspiration. Now, I want to go even deeper into this hidden mechanism that's been running your life without your awareness, because understanding how you lost your inner space is the first step toward reclaiming it. Alharion discovered that beneath all our conditioning, beneath all the layers of should and must and have to, there exists an untouched part of ourselves that remembers exactly who we are and why we're here. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to reclaim my space." This untouched part of yourself has been trying to communicate with you, but its voice has been drowned out by something Alharion called the weight of silence. This isn't the peaceful silence of meditation or contemplation. This is the dense, suffocating silence that accumulates when we swallow our truth day after day, year after year. Every time you bite your tongue instead of speaking your mind, every time you smile when you want to cry, every time you nod in agreement when everything inside you rebels, you're adding another layer to this internal weight. These unspoken thoughts don't simply disappear. They settle in your body like sediment, creating a peculiar kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. Alharion wrote about prayers that remain incomplete, not because we forget to finish them, but because we're afraid of what we might ask for. We dare not express our deepest desires because they might reveal how far we've strayed from the life we actually want to live. We silence our authentic emotions because they might inconvenience others or challenge the image we've carefully constructed. The result is a form of spiritual disconnection that masquerades as normal functioning. You go through the motions of living, but you're no longer truly alive. You exist in a state of perpetual performance, always playing a role that feels increasingly foreign to who you really are. One day, a young novice approached Alharion with a question that cut straight to the heart of this dilemma. The question was so simple, yet so profound, that it changed everything. "Master, have you ever felt like you no longer have space inside? Not sadness, not fear, not anger, but space. The absence of room within yourself for your own thoughts, feelings, and dreams." This question revealed the hidden mechanism behind so much of our suffering. We become so skilled at emptying others' emotional burdens, at being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who always has room for everyone else's problems, that we forget to maintain space for ourselves. We fill our inner world with swallowed silences, with promises we made to others but never to ourselves, with responsibilities that weren't ours to carry in the first place. Think about your own life. When was the last time you had a conversation with yourself that wasn't about solving someone else's problem or meeting some external expectation. When did you last feel that spacious feeling of simply being, without the pressure to perform, produce, or provide? The transformation Alharian teaches isn't about adding more practices or techniques to your already overcrowded life. It's about excavating the space that was always yours, removing the accumulated debris of other people's expectations and your own fear-based decisions. It's about remembering that your inner world belongs to you, and you have every right to guard it as fiercely as you would protect anything precious. Now, I want to reveal something even more startling that Alharian discovered about the mind itself, and how our thoughts can become the very fire that either burns us alive or transforms us completely. Write in the comments, "I need my space back." What Alharian uncovered was a pattern so universal, so pervasive, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. He observed the same tragic cycle repeating itself everywhere he looked. The monk who prayed with passionate fervor during the day, but trembled uncontrollably in his sleep. The healer who could cure everyone's ailments, but mysteriously fell ill whenever she tried to rest. The wise elder who dispensed life-changing advice to others, but had lost the strength to live by his own teachings. They were all exhausted by themselves, not tired from their work, not drained from external circumstances, but weary of carrying a version of themselves that no longer felt authentic. They had become prisoners of their own competence, trapped by their reputation for being strong, wise, and always available. Here's the devastating revelation that changed Alharian's entire understanding of human suffering. This invisible burden isn't just ignored by society, it's actively rewarded. The more you sacrifice yourself, the more people applaud your dedication. The more you endure without complaint, the more you're admired for your strength. The more you give until it hurts, the more you're celebrated for your generosity. But here's the cruel irony hidden behind the scenes of this social contract. The more recognition you receive for this performance, the more isolated you become. The very behaviors that earn you praise are the same ones that disconnect you from your authentic self. You become addicted to a form of validation that requires you to betray your own needs, creating a cycle where your worth becomes dependent on your willingness to disappear. This is perhaps the most insidious trap of all, because it disguises self-destruction as virtue. It makes martyrdom feel noble, and self-neglect appear selfless. The applause becomes a drug, and like any addiction, it requires increasingly higher doses to achieve the same effect. You push harder, give more, endure longer, all while the part of you that knows better grows quieter and quieter. Alharian realized that this wasn't a personal failing, but a systemic deception. Society needs people who will carry more than their share, who will smile through their pain, who will function as emotional shock absorbers for everyone else's dysfunction. And so it creates elaborate reward systems to keep us trapped in these patterns, making us believe that our value lies in our capacity to suffer silently. The transformation begins when you recognize that the recognition itself has become the problem, when you start questioning why you need external validation for choices that should be internally motivated, when you begin to see that the very thing you thought was helping others might actually be enabling their inability to help themselves. This mindset shift is revolutionary because it reveals a hidden truth about the nature of genuine service. Real impact comes not from depleting yourself, but from operating from a place of authentic fullness. When you're truly connected to your own source of energy and wisdom, you can give without diminishing yourself. Now, I want to explore something even more profound that Alharian discovered about the relationship between our physical bodies and these invisible emotional burdens, because the body never lies about what the soul is carrying. Write in the comments, "The applause was a trap." The body becomes our most honest teacher when we learn to listen to its language. Alharian discovered something that revolutionized his entire approach to transformation. Before you can change anything, you must first develop the courage to truly see it. In the ancient art of alchemy, the first step with any metal isn't to immediately begin the transformation process. The alchemist must first observe the metal, hold it, study its properties, and respect it for exactly what it is. Only through this intimate recognition can the metal eventually become gold. The same principle applies to the invisible burdens we carry. Most of us make the mistake of trying to fix, ignore, or push through our discomfort the moment we notice it. We want immediate relief, instant transformation, quick solutions. But Al-Harayan understood that this rush to change actually prevents real healing from occurring. The burden needs to be witnessed first, acknowledged for the role it has played in protecting us, before it can be released. This witnessing process often reveals something startling. Many of our deepest struggles have been showing up in our bodies for years, but we've been dismissing them as purely physical problems. Al-Harayan himself experienced this revelation through a mysterious pressure in his chest that defied every medical explanation available. Doctors examined him thoroughly, ran every test they could think of, and consistently found nothing wrong. His heart was strong, his lungs were clear, his body appeared perfectly healthy, yet the bad sensation of suffocation persisted. It wasn't a physical blockage, but something far more profound. His soul felt trapped in a room without windows, unable to breathe freely. The pressure wasn't coming from his lungs, it was emanating from the space between his physical body and his spiritual essence. Years of carrying responsibilities that weren't his, of silencing his authentic voice, of living according to others' expectations, had created an invisible compression around his heart. This is where the journey becomes deeply personal, because once you start paying attention to these subtle signals, you realize how much wisdom your body has been trying to share with you. That chronic tension in your shoulders might be the weight of everyone else's problems you've been carrying. The knot in your stomach could be your intuition screaming about decisions you're making against your better judgment. The constant fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure might be your soul's way of protesting a life that no longer fits who you're becoming. The breakthrough comes when you stop treating these physical manifestations as problems to be solved and start recognizing them as messengers carrying crucial information about your inner landscape. Your body isn't betraying you. It's desperately trying to guide you back to alignment with your authentic self. Now, I want to share with you the specific technique Al-Harayan developed for releasing these accumulated burdens, because understanding the problem is only half the equation. You also need a practical pathway to freedom. Write in the comments, "My body has been trying to tell me something." This practical pathway begins with understanding something revolutionary that Al-Harayan discovered about the nature of breath itself. The problem wasn't located in his lungs or respiratory system. The issue lay in the invisible space between his physical breathing apparatus and his soul's ability to receive that breath. When we stop breathing deeply, it's rarely because there's insufficient air available to us. Instead, our body literally forgets how to receive oxygen because layers of accumulated tension and unexpressed emotions have created barriers that block the natural flow. Think about this for a moment. When you're stressed or anxious, what happens to your breathing? It becomes shallow, rapid, confined to the upper chest. But this isn't a conscious decision you're making. Your body is responding to an internal environment that has become hostile to deep nourishment. Years of swallowing your truth, suppressing your authentic responses, and carrying burdens that don't belong to you have created a form of internal compression that literally prevents life force from entering fully. Al-Harayan called this phenomenon the soul's grip, what we might recognize today as anxiety, but with a much deeper understanding of its spiritual origins. In his time, they referred to it as the subtle knot, a tightness that couldn't be untied through any external remedy. No herbal formula could dissolve it. No amount of rest could relax it. No words of comfort could soothe it. It was a soul-level constriction that had to be addressed at its source. The cruelest aspect of this condition was its invisibility to others. From the outside, everything appeared normal. The person continued to smile, to function, to speak words of hope and encouragement. But internally, they were slowly suffocating on their own, unlived life. The gap between their public persona and their private experience grew wider each day, creating an exhaustion that went far beyond physical tiredness. What makes this particularly devastating is that our culture has no real framework for understanding or addressing this kind of suffering. We're offered surface-level solutions for soul-deep problems, We're told to manage our stress rather than examine why we're living in a way that creates chronic stress. We're encouraged to cope with anxiety rather than investigate what our soul is trying to protect us from. Alharian's approach was radically different because he understood that the tightness itself was intelligent. It wasn't a malfunction to be corrected, but a messenger carrying vital information about the misalignment between how we're living and who we truly are. The subtle knot forms when we chronically betray our inner knowing, when we consistently choose what looks right over what feels true. The transformation happens when we stop trying to force the knot to release and start having a conversation with it instead. When we approach our anxiety with curiosity rather than resistance, when we treat our breath as a bridge back to our authentic self rather than just a stress management technique. Now, I want to reveal the specific inner dialogue that Alharian developed to communicate with these protective mechanisms, because this is where the real alchemy begins to happen. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to have this conversation." This inner dialogue that Alharian developed was profoundly simple, yet it unlocked something that changed everything. An elder had shared with him a revelation that cut straight to the heart of the matter. It's not your body that wants air. It's your soul that asks for space. This single insight transformed Alharian's entire understanding of what was really happening when we feel that familiar tightness, that sense of suffocation that no physical remedy can touch. We systematically fill our interior landscape with demands that aren't ours, responsibilities we inherited without question, ideas that were planted in us by others, and an endless stream of thoughts that never pause long enough for our authentic self to speak. We become so crowded inside that there's literally no room left for our soul to breathe. It's like trying to live in a house where every room is packed floor to ceiling with other people's belongings, leaving no space for your own life to unfold. The transformation begins with something so simple, it almost seems too easy to be effective. Yet this is where Alharian's genius lay. He understood that the most profound changes often come through the gentlest interventions. The practice starts with nothing more than stopping midday, wherever you are, and closing your eyes. Not for meditation, not for any elaborate spiritual technique, but simply to observe whether you can still inhale without guilt creeping in, without haste pushing you forward, without the constant chatter of thoughts demanding your attention. This creates an opening that isn't physical, but energetic, a space where your soul can finally take a breath. At first, this pause feels almost uncomfortable, even anxiety-provoking. Your mind immediately starts listing all the things you should be doing instead. Your body wants to move, to stay busy, to remain productive. But if you stay present with this discomfort, instead of immediately fleeing from it, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to feel the difference between breathing for survival and breathing for nourishment. You discover that there's a quality of breath that goes beyond just moving air in and out of your lungs. This deeper breathing is what feeds the soul, what creates internal spaciousness, what allows your authentic self to emerge from beneath layers of accumulated conditioning. The daily pause becomes a form of rebellion against a culture that profits from your disconnection from yourself. Every time you stop and check in with your breath, you're choosing presence over productivity, being over doing, internal wisdom over external demands. You're reclaiming your right to exist as more than just a function, more than just a role, more than just a solution to everyone else's problems. Now, I want to explore something even more revolutionary that Alharian discovered about the nature of our thoughts themselves and how the very thing we think is protecting us might actually be the source of our deepest exhaustion. Write in the comments, "I'm taking back my space." This revolutionary understanding that Alharian uncovered reveals something profound about what we call stress in our modern world. What we're experiencing isn't actually a new human condition. It's simply a contemporary label for an ancient phenomenon that has plagued humanity for millennia. The systematic loss of inner space. That familiar pressure in your chest, that sense of being compressed from within, isn't a sign of weakness or failure. It's actually a signal, a desperate cry from a part of you that no longer fits within the confines of everything you do, give, and carry for others. The pressure is your soul's way of saying that you've exceeded your authentic capacity. You've taken on responsibilities that don't align with your true nature, adopted thought patterns that don't serve your highest good, and committed to a way of living that requires you to abandon yourself in order to function. The discomfort isn't the problem. It's the solution trying to emerge. It's your inner wisdom attempting to guide you back to a life that actually fits who you are. But here's where Alharian's insights become even more revealing. The thoughts that create the most damage aren't the dramatic ones, the obvious fears or the loud anxieties that grab our attention. The most destructive thoughts are the ones that whisper. They're the subtle, persistent voices that run like background software in your mind, quietly poisoning your rest even while you sleep. These are the thoughts that don't shout demands, but instead offer gentle suggestions that slowly erode your peace. They remind you of everything you haven't accomplished, everyone you might have disappointed, all the ways you could be doing better. They replay conversations from years ago, analyze every social interaction for hidden meanings, and project endless scenarios of potential future problems. Your mind becomes like a room without doors. Once these thoughts enter, they have no natural exit point. They circulate endlessly, creating a kind of mental fire that burns with just enough intensity to steal your peace, but not enough for you to recognize the emergency in time. This fire doesn't consume you quickly like a dramatic crisis would. Instead, it slowly depletes your energy, dims your natural brightness, and gradually disconnects you from your innate wisdom. The most insidious aspect of this mental pattern is how normal it feels. We've become so accustomed to living with constant mental chatter that we mistake it for thinking. We assume this is just how minds work, that everyone lives with this level of internal noise. But Alharian discovered that this isn't natural thinking, it's wounded thinking. It's the mind's attempt to protect you from perceived threats that may not even exist. The breakthrough comes when you realize that not every thought deserves your attention, not every mental suggestion requires your response, and not every worry needs to be solved before you can rest. Now, I want to reveal the specific technique Alharian developed for creating natural exit points in this room without doors, because once you learn how to give your thoughts permission to leave, everything changes. Write in the comments, "My thoughts have been burning me." This technique that Alharian developed came from observing someone whose struggle illuminated the hidden mechanics of mental torment. There was a brother in the monastery, known for his physical strength and unwavering dedication, who began displaying a peculiar behavior that revealed everything about how wounded thinking operates behind the scenes. Night after night, this brother would light a candle with a completely lost gaze in his eyes and leave it burning until dawn. This continued for 5 consecutive nights, then 10, then more. His face gradually dimmed, not from any physical illness that could be diagnosed, but from an internal battle that made absolutely no noise. From the outside, he appeared to be simply keeping vigil, perhaps engaged in deep contemplation or prayer. But something far more troubling was actually happening. When Alharian finally approached him with gentle concern, the brother's response revealed the terrifying truth about minds that have forgotten how to rest. "Because my mind doesn't quiet down," he said, "and when it does quiet down, I get even more scared." This confession exposed something that most people never recognize about their own mental patterns. We become addicted to the noise because silence feels dangerous. The brother's mind had learned to equate constant thinking with safety, constant vigilance with protection, constant mental activity with being alive. The idea of mental stillness had become more frightening than exhaustion itself. His wounded psyche had convinced him that if he stopped thinking, something terrible would happen. He might miss something important, fail to prevent some disaster, or simply cease to exist in some fundamental way. This is when Alharian understood a crucial distinction that changed everything. The mind that never stops isn't displaying wisdom or intelligence. It's a wound that has learned to talk too much. Just like a person who can't stop talking often speaks from nervousness rather than having something meaningful to say, a mind that can't stop thinking is usually operating from trauma rather than insight. The constant mental chatter isn't actually solving problems or keeping you safe. It's a coping mechanism that has outlived its usefulness, a protective strategy that has become the very thing you need protection from. The mind creates the illusion of productivity while actually preventing you from accessing the deeper intelligence that can only emerge in moments of genuine stillness. What makes this pattern so difficult to break is that our culture reinforces it constantly. We're told that busy minds are productive minds, that constant thinking equals engagement with life, that mental stillness is laziness or spiritual bypassing. But Al-Harayan discovered that the opposite is true. The mind's natural state is spacious awareness, and anything else is a deviation from health. Now, I want to share with you the gentle but powerful approach Al-Harayan developed for speaking to the wounded mind like a tired friend, because this changes everything about how we relate to our own thoughts. Write in the comments, "My mind is tired of protecting me." This gentle approach that Al-Harayan developed was revolutionary because it recognized something that most people miss entirely. The mind that won't rest isn't being rebellious or difficult. It's being protective. The rumination fire that burns through your consciousness doesn't operate with dramatic intensity. Instead, it burns with relentless constancy, creating a form of mental exhaustion that's almost impossible to pinpoint. These aren't the thoughts that shout accusations or create obvious panic. They're the soft, persistent whispers that never completely stop. They don't insult you directly, but they drain your energy. They don't create immediate fear, but they repeat themselves so frequently that they eventually drown out your soul's voice beneath an endless stream of mental noise. It's like having a radio playing quietly in the background 24 hours a day, not loud enough to be obviously disturbing, but constant enough to prevent any real rest. The breakthrough came when Al-Harayan realized that trying to force this type of mind into silence was like trying to force an exhausted child to stop crying by shouting at them. The approach that actually works is counterintuitive. Instead of demanding that the thoughts stop, you give them permission to rest. He began speaking to his own mind the way he would speak to a dear friend who had been working too hard for too long. "You can rest now," he would say gently, either aloud or internally. "You don't have to protect me from everything. You don't have to solve every problem or prevent every possible mistake. I'm no longer in danger. You've done such a good job keeping me safe. But now you can let go." This compassionate approach created something remarkable. The internal fire began to calm not through force or discipline, but through recognition and kindness. The mind, when spoken to with genuine appreciation for its efforts, often releases its grip naturally. It's as if the constant thinking was simply a request for acknowledgement, a way of saying, "I've been working so hard to keep you safe. Do you notice? Do you care?" When you approach your racing thoughts with curiosity instead of frustration, when you thank your mind for trying to protect you rather than criticizing it for being overactive, something shifts fundamentally in your internal landscape. The mental noise doesn't disappear overnight, but it begins to transform from an enemy into an ally that's simply been working overtime. The key insight here is that your mind isn't broken, it's exhausted. It's been carrying responsibilities that were never meant to be carried mentally. It's been trying to control outcomes that are actually beyond anyone's control. It's been attempting to think its way out of problems that can only be resolved through feeling, through intuition, through trust. Now, I want to reveal something even more profound that Al-Harayan discovered about the relationship between our emotional wounds and our physical bodies, because the body holds the history of everything we've been unwilling to feel. Write in the comments, "I'm giving my mind permission to rest." This profound recognition about the mind led Al-Harayan to develop what he called the ritual of inner peace, but it wasn't anything elaborate or mystical. Each night before sleep, he would simply close his eyes, not to escape from reality, but to finally look inward with intention. He would imagine his mind as a room filled with different voices, some clearly his own, and others that he'd absorbed from family, society, past experiences, and cultural conditioning. The transformation happened when he stopped trying to silence these voices, and instead began thanking them. Even the thoughts that had worn him down, even the worries that had stolen his sleep, even the self-criticisms that had dimmed his confidence, he acknowledged each one with gratitude for the role it had played in trying to keep him safe. Then, with genuine compassion, he would declare, "Now I can rest. I no longer need to think so much." This simple practice created a shift that rippled through every aspect of his being. But nowhere was this more evident than in his relationship with his physical body. Alharion began to understand something that would revolutionize how he approached not just mental wellness, but physical healing as well. The body is the soul's most loyal instrument, and it never lies, never exaggerates, never creates drama for attention. When pain persists in your body without any apparent physical cause, when medical tests come back normal but you still feel discomfort, when certain areas of tension never seem to fully release no matter what treatments you try, these aren't signs that you're imagining things or that something is seriously wrong. They're often representations of unattended soul wounds that have found expression through your physical form. Your body remembers everything your soul didn't dare to express. Every time you swallowed words you needed to speak, every emotion you pushed down to keep peace, every authentic response you suppressed to meet others' expectations. None of that energy simply disappears. It gets stored in your muscles, your organs, your nervous system, creating a library of unexpressed experiences that continues to influence how you feel and function. The jaw that stays perpetually tight might be holding years of unspoken truths. The shoulders that carry constant tension could be bearing the weight of responsibilities that were never truly yours. The stomach that churns with anxiety might be your intuition, trying to tell you something important about the decisions you're making or the relationships you're maintaining. This isn't metaphorical. It's measurably real. Your body becomes the repository for all the life experiences you haven't fully processed, the emotions you haven't completely felt, the truths you haven't courageously spoken. Now, I want to share with you the specific practice Alharion developed for listening to these physical messages and transforming them back into the wisdom they were always meant to convey. Write in the comments, "My body has been keeping score." This practice that Alharion developed became crystal clear through a story that illustrates exactly how the body translates emotional experiences into physical symptoms. He encountered a healer who had been carrying persistent pain between her shoulder blades for months. She attributed it to the physical demands of her work, lifting heavy baskets, tending to patients, the constant bending and reaching that her profession required. But when Alharion asked her when the pain first appeared, something remarkable emerged. The pain had started on the exact day she made a crucial decision to bury her feelings in order to remain strong for everyone who depended on her. Her sister had died suddenly, and instead of allowing herself to grieve, instead of taking time to process the loss, she immediately threw herself into caring for others who were also mourning. This wasn't a physical burden creating the pain. It was emotional weight that had no other way to express itself except through her body. Her shoulder blades, the place where we symbolically carry burdens, had become the storage site for grief she felt she couldn't afford to feel, sadness she believed she didn't have permission to express, and vulnerability she thought would make her less effective as a healer. The connection became even more obvious when Alharion began paying attention to his own body with this new understanding. He noticed a persistent rigidity in his jaw that he dismissed as a minor inconvenience, perhaps from sleeping in an awkward position or grinding his teeth. But the truth was far more revealing. This tension had accumulated from all the words he'd never spoken, all the times he wanted to express his authentic feelings but chose to smile instead, all the moments when his soul was screaming, but his mouth remained diplomatically quiet. Your body literally speaks for you when you consistently silence yourself. It becomes the repository for every unexpressed truth, every swallowed emotion, every authentic response that you deemed too dangerous, too inconvenient, or too threatening to the peace you're trying to maintain. The jaw holds unspoken words. The throat constricts around unexpressed feelings. The chest tightens when the heart has been closed off from its natural responses. This isn't your body betraying you or breaking down randomly. This is your body being incredibly loyal to your emotional experience, preserving and protecting everything you haven't felt safe enough to express in the moment it occurred. Your physical symptoms become a form of storage, a way of keeping important information available until you're ready to listen and respond. The transformation happens when you start approaching your body as a wise teacher rather than a problematic machine that needs fixing. Instead of just treating the physical symptoms, you begin having conversations with the parts of your body that are speaking to you. Now, I want to reveal the specific dialogue technique that Alharian used to unlock these stored messages and transform physical tension back into the emotional wisdom it was always meant to convey. Write in the comments, "My body is trying to tell me something important." This dialogue technique that Alharian developed transforms your entire relationship with physical discomfort because it's built on a fundamental understanding. Nothing in your body happens by coincidence. When your throat constricts into a knot, it's because you're silencing truths that desperately need to be spoken. When your chest feels heavy with invisible weight, it's because tears have been held back for too long. When your stomach churns with persistent tension, it's because you're taking actions that your deeper wisdom doesn't trust. When your back strains under mysterious pressure, it's because you've been carrying everyone else's emotional life as if it were your responsibility. Your body writes what your soul cannot say. It becomes a living manuscript of unexpressed experiences, unprocessed emotions, and unacknowledged truths. The physical sensations you feel aren't random. They're precisely located messages about specific aspects of your life that need attention. The practice begins each night before sleep, when Alharian would scan his body like reading a sacred map. But instead of approaching physical tension with the usual questions we've been conditioned to ask, "What's wrong with me? What do I have? How do I fix this?" he learned to ask completely different questions that unlocked the wisdom hidden within the discomfort. When he encountered tension or pain, he would pause and inquire with genuine curiosity. "What am I not seeing in my life right now? What is this part of me trying to tell me? What truth have I been avoiding? What emotion have I been postponing? What boundary have I been afraid to set?" These questions shift you from being a victim of mysterious symptoms to being an active participant in decoding your body's intelligence. Sometimes the answers come immediately: a sudden recognition of what you've been carrying that doesn't belong to you, an insight about a relationship that's draining your energy, or an acknowledgement of dreams you've been afraid to pursue. Other times, the conversation unfolds more gradually, with your body releasing tension simply because it feels heard and understood for the first time. The healing often happens not through adding something new to your life, but through recognizing what you've been carrying for far too long. That knot in your shoulders might dissolve when you finally admit that you've been trying to manage your adult children's problems. The tightness in your chest might ease when you acknowledge that you've been holding grief from a loss you never properly mourned. This approach revolutionizes the entire healing journey because it honors your body as an intelligent ally rather than treating it as a malfunctioning machine that needs to be forced back into compliance. Now, I want to explore something even more fundamental that Alharian discovered about the nature of transformation itself, and why the very thing we think is weighing us down might actually be the raw material for our greatest breakthrough. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to decode my body's messages." This fundamental understanding about transformation that Alharian uncovered reveals why traditional approaches to healing often fall short. The real alchemy isn't about turning base metals into gold in some external laboratory. It's about transforming the internal metal that accumulates within your soul over years of living, surviving, and protecting yourself from perceived threats. Every unexpressed emotion becomes a fragment of metal lodged in your energetic body. Every unhealed trauma crystallizes into weight that you carry without conscious awareness. Every idea you absorbed from others but never questioned. Every belief you adopted to fit in. Every response pattern you developed to avoid rejection. All of these become metallic deposits within your soul. But here's the crucial insight that changes everything. These aren't punishments or evidence that you're broken. They're protection mechanisms that served you at specific points in your journey. That tendency to say yes when you mean no started as a way to avoid conflict and maintain connection. The perfectionism that now exhausts you once helped you feel worthy of love and acceptance. The hypervigilance that keeps your nervous system activated was originally a survival strategy that kept you safe in an unpredictable environment. The people-pleasing patterns that drain your energy were once brilliant adaptations that helped you navigate challenging relationships. The transformation begins when you recognize that everything weighing you down was once protection, but if it no longer protects you, then it's limiting you. The very strategies that helped you survive certain chapters of your life can become the barriers that prevent you from thriving in your current chapter. Learning to release these patterns isn't about rejecting or condemning them. It's about honoring what served its purpose while choosing not to continue carrying it as if it were your identity. This reframe is revolutionary because it eliminates shame from the healing process. You're not wrong for developing these protective mechanisms. You're not weak for having accumulated this internal weight. You're not broken for carrying patterns that no longer serve you. You're simply human, and being human means adapting to circumstances, sometimes in ways that create temporary solutions with long-term consequences. The alchemical process involves approaching these metallic fragments with appreciation rather than resistance. When you can thank your anxiety for trying to keep you safe, when you can acknowledge your perfectionism for attempting to make you lovable, when you can honor your people-pleasing for trying to maintain connection, then these patterns begin to soften naturally. Now, I want to share with you the specific transformation ritual that Alharion developed for melting these internal metals back into their original essence, because this is where the real magic of personal alchemy takes place. Write in the comments, "I see my patterns as old protection." This transformation ritual that Alharion developed is elegantly simple, yet profoundly effective, because it works with your psyche's natural intelligence rather than against it. The practice begins by sitting in comfortable silence, not as an escape from your challenges, but as a way to finally face them with compassion and clarity. In your mind's eye, imagine an internal table where you can see the metallic fragments that represent the various burdens you've been carrying. Each piece of metal on this table symbolizes a different protective pattern. Perhaps one represents your need to control outcomes, another, your tendency to absorb others' emotions, another, your habit of putting everyone else's needs before your own. The magic happens when you approach each fragment not with judgment or frustration, but with genuine curiosity. Ask each piece when it first arrived in your life and what it originally came to protect you from. Listen without trying to fix or change anything. Often, you'll discover that these patterns developed during times when you genuinely needed protection, when you were vulnerable and doing your best to navigate challenging circumstances. Then comes the crucial moment of release. You thank each fragment for the service it provided, acknowledging how it helped you survive certain chapters of your life. Finally, with sincere appreciation, you declare, "You can rest now. I no longer need you to protect me in this way." As you speak these words with authentic intention, visualize the metal piece melting, transforming into pure light, and dissolving completely. This isn't just a visualization exercise, it's a profound act of renegotiating your relationship with old survival patterns. The transformation happens because you're not trying to force change through willpower or criticism. Instead, you're creating space for natural evolution through recognition and gratitude. But here's where Alharion's understanding becomes even more sophisticated. He realized that the same fire that can destroy can also illuminate, warm, and transform. The intense energy you feel, whether it manifests as anxiety, restlessness, or that burning sensation in your chest, isn't inherently destructive. Fire is simply energy, and energy itself is neutral. The key is learning to direct this fire with consciousness rather than allowing it to burn chaotically without purpose or direction. Your internal fire isn't your enemy. Your unconscious relationship with it is what creates problems. When you don't recognize the fire for what it is, when you try to suppress it or let it run wild without guidance, that's when it becomes destructive rather than transformative. Now I want to reveal how Alharion learned to channel this internal fire into the very force that awakens your deepest creative and spiritual potential, because this transforms everything about how you experience intensity in your life. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to work with my fire consciously." This conscious relationship with internal fire became clear to Alharion through his encounter with a remarkable young woman whose story illustrates exactly how to transform destructive burning into creative vitality. She was someone with extraordinarily intense energy, brilliant ideas flowing constantly, emotions that ran deep and powerful, a mind that moved at lightning speed through possibilities and connections that others couldn't see. But instead of learning to channel this intensity, she was constantly trying to contain it, control it, or exhaust it through relentless activity. She would push herself to the point of collapse, literally burning through her energy reserves until she had nothing left. Then she would crash, sometimes for days, feeling depleted and wondering why she couldn't maintain a steady, manageable pace like everyone else seemed to do. What she didn't understand, and what most people with intense internal fire don't realize, is that her soul wasn't burning to consume her or punish her for being too much. The fire was actually trying to remind her that she was vibrantly, powerfully alive. Her work wasn't to extinguish this flame or force it into smaller, more socially acceptable proportions. Her work was to learn to dance with it. This reframe changes everything about how you approach your own intensity. That restlessness you feel, that sense of burning urgency that seems to come from nowhere, that impulse to move or create or express something you can't quite name. This isn't a problem to be solved. It's energy seeking direction, creativity looking for an outlet, life force asking to be channeled into something meaningful. Alharion taught her a practice that transforms internal urgency into conscious creation. When you feel that familiar burning sensation, that restless energy coursing through your system, instead of trying to suppress it or tire yourself out fighting it, you pause and visualize a flame right in the center of your chest. But rather than rejecting this fire or being afraid of its intensity, you approach it with curiosity and respect. You ask this flame, "What are you trying to do for me right now? What wants to be expressed? What needs to move through me?" Then, instead of letting the energy burn chaotically, you give it conscious direction. You might channel it through writing without censoring what comes out, through walking in nature while letting your mind wander freely, through speaking truths you've been holding back, or through creating something completely unknown and unexpected. The transformation happens when you realize that this fire is actually your creative life force, your spiritual vitality, your soul's way of saying it has something important to contribute to the world. Now, I want to explore something even more profound that Alharion discovered about the healing power of silence and how the absence of noise can become the most potent medicine for an overstimulated soul. Write in the comments, "I'm learning to dance with my intensity." This healing power of silence that Alharion discovered was revolutionary because he understood that silence isn't simply the absence of noise, it's the presence of something much more profound. Most people experience silence as uncomfortable, even anxiety-provoking, because we've become so accustomed to constant stimulation, constant input, constant mental activity, that the absence of noise feels like emptiness rather than fullness. But Alharion learned to stay present during uncomfortable silence instead of immediately reaching for distractions, and what he discovered changed his entire approach to healing and transformation. When you remain present with silence for more than just a few moments, when you resist the urge to fill the space with music, conversation, or mental activity, something extraordinary begins to happen. Initially, the silence feels awkward, restless, almost unbearable. Your mind starts generating reasons why you should be doing something productive instead. Your body wants to move, to fidget, to engage in some form of activity. But if you stay present with this discomfort instead of fleeing from it, the silence begins to transform. What initially felt like emptiness gradually becomes containment, a spacious vessel where your energy can reorganize itself naturally without your conscious intervention. This is where the real medicine reveals itself. Alharion noticed that the more time he spent in this quality of silence, the clearer his following day became. Problems that had seemed complex and overwhelming suddenly had obvious solutions. Answers he had been seeking through research, analysis, or advice from others began arising spontaneously from within his own awareness. Difficult decisions that had been paralyzing him became self-evident. Ideas that had been scattered and chaotic began ordering themselves into coherent patterns and insights. It was as if silence didn't just calm his nervous system, it actually revealed hidden wisdom that had been obscured by the constant noise of modern living. The answers he needed were already present within him, but they required stillness to become audible. The clarity he was seeking was already available, but it needed space to emerge. This discovery completely revolutionized his understanding of where guidance comes from. Instead of constantly looking outside himself for solutions, strategies, and validation, he began trusting that silence itself was a form of active intelligence that could reorganize his inner landscape in ways his conscious mind could never accomplish through effort alone. The transformation happens when you realize that silence isn't passive. It's the most active force in the universe, constantly creating, reorganizing, and revealing what needs to be known. Now, I want to share with you the profound discovery Alharian made about the power of authentic speech, and how your voice becomes a tool for creating reality rather than just describing it. Write in the comments, "Silence is teaching me." This profound discovery about authentic speech emerged from Alharian's understanding that every word you speak is actually a vibrational seed planted not just in the world around you, but deep within your own being. When you pronounce a word, it doesn't simply leave your mouth and disappear into the air. It reverberates through your entire system, creating internal waves that continue to influence your thoughts, emotions, and energy long after the sound has faded. Most people speak habitually, unconsciously, using words to fill space rather than create change. But Alharian discovered that when you speak from consciousness, when your words emerge from authentic inner truth rather than social, conditioning or fear-based reactions, something extraordinary happens. Your voice becomes a sacred channel that doesn't just inform others about reality, it actually participates in creating reality through the power of authentic vibration. This isn't mystical thinking, it's practical alchemy. When you consistently speak words that align with your deepest truth, your entire energy field begins to reorganize itself around that vibration. When you habitually express gratitude, your nervous system starts operating from appreciation rather than scarcity. When you regularly articulate your authentic needs and boundaries, your relationships begin shifting to honor those declarations. But here's what makes this even more powerful. Alharian realized that this principle extends far beyond formal speech into what he called internal ritual. True ritual, he discovered, doesn't depend on elaborate ceremonies, special objects, or sacred locations. True ritual happens when you perform any action with complete presence and conscious intention. When you drink water with genuine gratitude for the nourishment it provides, that becomes a sacred act. When you walk with full awareness of each step connecting you to the earth, that becomes a form of moving meditation. When you wash your hands while intentionally releasing whatever energy you've absorbed that doesn't belong to you, that becomes a purification ceremony. The transformation occurs when you recognize that every moment offers an opportunity to choose consciousness over automation, presence over distraction, intention over habit. Your entire life becomes a living prayer, a continuous ritual of awakening, when you approach ordinary activities as opportunities for extraordinary awareness. This isn't about adding more practices to your already busy schedule. It's about transforming the practices you're already doing into conscious acts of creation and connection. Now, I want to reveal something that fundamentally changed how Alharian understood personal energy and why protecting your inner space isn't selfish. It's actually the most generous thing you can do for everyone around you. Write in the comments, "My daily life is becoming sacred." This fundamental understanding about personal energy that changed everything for Alharian emerged from a startling realization. Not everything you feel actually belongs to you. There are exhaustions that have nothing to do with your activities, emotions that don't match your actual circumstances, and heaviness that seems to appear out of nowhere after certain interactions or environments. For years, Alharian had assumed that whatever he was feeling was his responsibility to process, understand, and heal. But through careful observation, he began to notice patterns that revealed a hidden truth about how energy moves between people. After spending time with certain individuals, he would feel inexplicably drained, confused, or agitated, not because anything dramatic had occurred, but because he had unconsciously absorbed their unprocessed emotions, unresolved conflicts, or energetic residue. The breakthrough came when he learned to ask a simple but revolutionary question whenever he felt off balance. Is this feeling actually mine? More often than he had expected, the answer was no. And remarkably, simply naming the foreign energy and recognizing it as not his own would cause it to release immediately, like a weight lifting from his shoulders. Without any complex healing work required, this discovery transformed his entire approach to what he had thought was his own emotional and energetic healing. Protecting your energetic field, he realized, isn't about building walls or avoiding people. It's about inhabiting yourself with such clarity and presence that nothing external can take up residence in your inner space without your conscious permission. But perhaps even more profound was his realization about the source of chronic exhaustion that plagues so many sensitive, caring people. The fatigue doesn't come from giving too much. It comes from believing that everything you give must originate from your personal reserves. You treat yourself as if you're the source of all wisdom, love, guidance, and energy, rather than recognizing yourself as a channel through which something much larger flows. When you understand that you're not the source but the channel, everything changes. You stop trying to generate love from your individual heart and start allowing universal love to move through you. You stop forcing wisdom from your mind and start trusting deeper intelligence to speak through you. You stop depleting yourself, trying to heal others, and start becoming a clear conduit for healing energy that doesn't belong to you but moves through you. When you're properly aligned with this greater source, everything begins to flow naturally. The right words arrive when you need them. Actions organize themselves. Effortlessly, fatigue diminishes because you're not carrying what was never yours to carry. And your heart expands because it's connected to something infinitely larger than your individual experience. Now, I want to share with you the culminating realization that Al-Hirayan reached about the ultimate purpose of all this inner work, and how your personal transformation becomes the greatest gift you can offer to a world hungry for authentic examples of healed humanity. Write in the comments, "I'm learning to be a clear channel." This culminating realization that Al-Hirayan reached fundamentally transformed his understanding of what true power actually looks like. For years, he had believed that inner fire was something to be cultivated through discipline, effort, and spiritual practices designed to make him stronger, more resilient, more capable of handling life's challenges. But through his journey of releasing old burdens and learning to channel energy consciously, he discovered something that revolutionized everything. The most powerful internal fire doesn't emerge from hardness, discipline, or forcing yourself to be better. It's born from something much more gentle and sustainable: love, quiet joy, tenderness toward yourself and others, and a sense of wonder about the mystery of existence itself. This kind of fire operates completely differently from the burning intensity that exhausts you. This gentle fire doesn't drain your resources. It elevates your entire being. It doesn't push you forward through sheer will. It attracts opportunities, relationships, and experiences that align with your authentic nature. When this flame is lit within you, something magical happens to the quality of your daily experience. Effort transforms into fluidity, as if you're swimming downstream rather than fighting against the current. Duty becomes desire, because you're finally doing what your soul actually wants to do, rather than what you think you should do. Burdens become light, because you're no longer carrying what was never yours to carry in the first place. But here's the ultimate revelation that Al-Hirayan reached about the true purpose of all this inner work. You didn't come to this planet to transform the world through external action, activism, or trying to fix what's broken around you. You came to transform yourself so completely that your very presence becomes a living example of what's possible for human consciousness. The true alchemist isn't someone who changes the world through force or persuasion. The true alchemist is someone who changes themselves so authentically that their internal transformation naturally illuminates a path for others who are ready to walk their own journey of awakening. Your healed presence becomes a silent invitation for others to remember their own capacity for healing. This isn't about becoming perfect or achieving some final state of enlightenment. It's about caring for your inner fire with the same tenderness you would show a beloved friend, and remembering who you are when you allow yourself to burn with truth rather than obligation. Now, I want to leave you with the most important question that emerged from Alharian's entire journey, because this question has the power to completely shift how you approach every day of your remaining life. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to tend my gentle fire." This question that emerged from Alharian's journey is simply this: what would your life look like if you stopped carrying what was never yours to begin with and started living from the fire that's been waiting inside you all along? If you've made it this far with me, something tells me this isn't just another video for you. This message found you for a reason, and that reason probably has everything to do with the fact that you're ready to stop living everyone else's version of your life and start honoring what your soul has been trying to tell you. I share these ancient teachings because I believe there are people like you who are hungry for something deeper than surface-level solutions, something more authentic than quick fixes. If this content resonates with you, if it feels like a conversation you've been waiting to have, then I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community of people who are committed to real transformation. Let me know you made it to the end by writing, "This message was meant for me," in the comments. When I see that phrase, I'll know this video served its purpose, connecting with someone who's ready to remember who they really are, beneath all the layers of what they think they should be. And if this conversation touched something in you, if you felt that recognition I was talking about at the beginning, hit the like button. It helps me know these messages are reaching the right people, and it helps others who need this find their way here too. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how to practically apply these teachings in your daily life, especially when you're dealing with people and situations that try to pull you back into old patterns. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey we've started today is just the beginning.